Welcome to today's Explainer. Right now, there is a massively high stakes geopolitical chess match playing out between the United States and Iran. And right at the center of it, a fascinating and honestly kind of astonishing legal loophole. It's a loophole that could literally allow the executive branch to completely bypass Congress and launch a massive new military offensive. So let's unpack exactly how military law and global diplomacy are colliding in real time. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. 1. Operation Epic Fury. 2. The 60-Day Law. 3. Failed Diplomacy. And 4. Operation Sledgehammer. Let's kick things right off with Section 1, Operation Epic Fury, and those crucial first 40 days. To really understand the current threat, we need to look at exactly where the initial conflict paused. As you can see on this timeline, the U.S. launched a military campaign called Operation Epic Fury back on February 28th. But here is the critical part. A ceasefire was successfully brokered, pausing the fighting exactly 40 days in. So the conflict came to a halt well short of a very specific 60-day legal deadline. Keep that number in mind, because those 40 days set up absolutely everything that follows. Following that ceasefire, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio publicly cemented the pause. He officially declared, and I quote, "Epic Fury concluded. We achieved the objective. We prefer the path of peace." Now, on the surface, that just sounds like standard diplomatic phrasing, right? But legally speaking, officially declaring that specific operation over is an absolutely crucial distinction the administration is relying on. Which brings us to Section 2, the 60-Day Law, or what we can call America's war clock. Under U.S. law, there is quite literally a ticking clock on military action. It works like this. Step 1. A president absolutely has the authority to independently initiate a military strike. Step 2. The military can then operate for up to 60 days. But Step 3 is where things get really tricky. After those 60 days of combat, the president has to get majority approval from both houses of Congress to keep going. If Congress says no, well, the U.S. faces a mandatory 30-day window to completely withdraw its forces. So doing the math here, the crucial point is this. Because Operation Epic Fury already burned through 40 days of that initial 60-day window, merely restarting the exact same operation would leave the administration with only 20 days left before hitting that hard legal wall. 20 days. That is barely enough time to mobilize, let alone execute a sustained military campaign before being legally forced to ask Congress for permission. And this brilliantly illustrates the domestic political hurdle we're looking at. You have the Trump administration actively seeking maximum military flexibility to deal with what they view as a pressing international threat. But on the other side, the opposition Democratic Party holds a strong anti-war stance regarding Iran, and they would almost certainly block any congressional approval for a military extension. Simply put, going to Congress is just not a viable route for the administration to keep their military options open. All right, moving into Section 3, failed diplomacy and the backdoor collapse. With the legal clock ticking loudly, both sides actually tried to resolve this quietly behind the scenes. Because the U.S. and Iran don't have direct formal relations, intermediary nations like Pakistan stepped in to pass messages back and forth. They exchanged a whole series of conditional peace proposals, detailing what each side would need to permanently halt the hostilities. And finally, Iran submitted what was considered to be their ultimate final offer. But that diplomacy collapsed, and it collapsed spectacularly. When Donald Trump received Iran's final proposal, his reaction was incredibly swift. As reported, he aggressively dismissed the document, calling it garbage, unbelievably weak, and stated that it was a total waste of time reading. So this wasn't just a simple rejection, folks. It was a total breakdown of that backdoor diplomatic channel. Consequently, both sides have completely dug in their heels. The U.S. is maintaining its absolute demand for a complete halt to Iran's nuclear ambitions, a strict zero-tolerance policy. Meanwhile, Iran has flatly refused to bow to American pressure or alter its nuclear stance. Because of this unyielding stalemate, the ceasefire is now incredibly fragile. Intelligence suggests it could shatter at literally any given moment. Which leads us directly to the climax of this explainer in Section 4, Operation Sledgehammer and the loophole reveal. If this ceasefire breaks, the administration is reportedly planning to launch a brand new offensive, dubbed Operation Sledgehammer. The plan is to strike right from where the ceasefire left off, but with double the military force. But honestly, the most important part of this whole plan isn't the firepower. It's the name. By strategically renaming the offensive, they're playing a very specific, very clever legal card.
See, by giving the attack a brand new name and relying on Secretary of State Marco Rubio's earlier declaration that the old operation was permanently concluded, the administration argues that they legally reset that 60-day constitutional clock right back to zero. Yep, back to zero. In the eyes of military law, it's a completely clean slate.
Let's look at this comparison, because this is the crux of the entire strategy. Operation Epic Fury, that was the old war. If they restarted it, they'd have just 20 days left before needing to face Congress. But Operation Sledgehammer? Legally, that's defined as a new war. 0 days have been used. This grants the president 2 full months, 60 complete days, to execute a bombing campaign against Iran, entirely bypassing the requirement for approval from a Democratic-controlled Congress.
So this leaves us looking at a highly volatile situation and a massive constitutional loophole. The critical question is this: will these fractured diplomatic channels somehow miraculously survive, or is Operation Sledgehammer about to exploit this legal reset and unleash a massive new wave of conflict? And zooming out even further, if a simple name change can essentially reset the clock on war, what does that actually mean for the limits of executive power going forward? Keep a close eye on the news, everyone, because that 60-day clock might just be waiting to start ticking again. Thanks for joining me on today's Explainer.